Today, we're diving into a massive geopolitical development that's sending shockwaves across Europe. Denmark has effectively blocked Russia's access to the Baltic Sea, and this bold move has placed the entire region under NATO's control. This is not just a minor diplomatic issue, it's a turning point that could reshape the balance of power in Northern Europe. For Russia, the Baltic Sea has always been a lifeline, a critical gateway for trade, energy routes, and military operations. But now that door seems to be closing fast. For decades, Moscow has viewed the Baltic Sea as essential to maintaining influence in Europe. It's home to Russia's only warm water port in the region, Kaliningrad, a heavily militarized enclave sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania. But Denmark's latest actions, backed by NATO allies, have drastically limited Moscow's ability to operate freely in the area. The Danish government has tightened control over key maritime routes, expanded surveillance operations, and coordinated closely with NATO to monitor Russian ships. This has left the Kremlin furious and scrambling for alternatives. Denmark's move is not sudden. It's the result of years of rising tension, triggered by Russia's aggression in Ukraine, cyber operations across Europe, and military provocations near NATO borders. After the Ukraine invasion, the Baltic states Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania pushed for stronger NATO presence in the region. Denmark, sitting at the gateway between the North Sea and the Baltic, became a natural player in this strategic chessboard. Now, the Danish Straits, the narrow waterways connecting the Baltic Sea to the Atlantic, have become one of the most critical choke points in global geopolitics. This blockade isn't a full-scale military one, but it's just as effective. Denmark, along with its NATO allies, has used its control over shipping lanes and surveillance zones to effectively monitor and restrict Russian vessels. Every movement of Russian ships, whether military or commercial, is now under strict scrutiny. Intelligence sharing between Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and NATO headquarters has reached unprecedented levels. It's a coordinated effort that shows just how integrated NATO's Baltic defenses have become. Russia's response, however, has been filled with anger. The Kremlin has accused Denmark of sabotaging freedom of navigation and violating maritime laws. Russian state media has painted Denmark as a puppet of Washington, claiming that this is part of a wider Western plan to isolate Russia. Yet the reality is that Denmark's actions are fully backed by NATO's legal authority and mutual defense obligations. The alliance considers the Baltic Sea an internal security zone, and with Sweden and Finland now full members, Moscow's influence there has nearly evaporated. The addition of Finland and Sweden to NATO has completely changed the security map. Before their entry, Russia still had strategic leverage along the northern flank of Europe. Now, NATO controls every coastline surrounding the Baltic Sea, except for Russia's small slice at Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg. This means that in any conflict, Moscow would be isolated almost instantly. Denmark's role in enforcing maritime control completes this NATO circle, effectively sealing off Russia from the west through the Baltic. This has made the Kremlin deeply nervous. Russian naval commanders now face restricted access to international waters. Any movement from Kaliningrad must pass through the Danish Straits, where NATO sensors, drones, and submarines operate constantly. The days when Russian ships could freely move toward the Atlantic or conduct shadow operations under the radar are gone. This is the new reality, one where Denmark's geographic position gives NATO unmatched leverage. The political symbolism of this move cannot be overstated. For Denmark, this is about defending democratic values and collective security. For Russia, it's another sign that its empire-building ambitions are collapsing. Since the war in Ukraine, Moscow has been systematically losing influence first in Eastern Europe, then in Central Asia, and now in the Baltic region. Each loss weakens Putin's narrative of strength and control. Domestically, the Kremlin tries to spin it as Western aggression, but even Russian analysts know this is a strategic defeat. Meanwhile, NATO's unity is stronger than ever. the alliance has learned from past divisions and is now operating with remarkable cohesion. The US, UK, Germany, and Poland have all increased military support for Denmark's operations. Advanced surveillance systems have been installed along Danish shores. The Øresund Bridge region, connecting Denmark and Sweden, now hosts some of NATO's most advanced radar and defense systems. These steps have turned the area into a fortress of security and deterrence. On the other side, Russia is struggling to maintain a presence in the Baltic. Its navy is aging, its logistics are strained, and its resources are diverted toward the war in Ukraine. The once feared Baltic fleet is now largely symbolic. Many of its ships are outdated, and maintenance problems are widespread due to sanctions and budget cuts. Moscow has even resorted to moving some assets away from Kaliningrad, fearing they might be trapped in case of conflict. The once powerful image of Russian naval dominance in the Baltic is now history. Economically, the consequences are just as serious. Russia's access to trade routes in the Baltic has shrunk dramatically. Many Western shipping companies now avoid Russian ports due to sanctions and insurance risks. Denmark's new maritime policies make it harder for Russian goods, including oil and gas, to transit through its waters. With global energy markets turning away from Russian supplies, this further isolates Moscow from Europe. In short, Denmark's actions hit both Russia's military and its economy at the same time. This situation has also exposed Russia's over-reliance on its geography. The country's maritime strategy has always depended on access to key seas: the Baltic, the Black Sea, and the Arctic. Losing maneuverability in one of these areas is a major setback. In the Baltic, that loss is particularly painful because it's where Russia interacts most directly with Europe. The inability to project power or secure trade routes there weakens its overall global posture. It's another example of how strategic miscalculations are slowly boxing Moscow in. For Denmark, this assertiveness marks a new era in its foreign policy. Traditionally, Denmark has been known for diplomacy and stability rather than confrontation. But with global security shifting and the war in Ukraine reshaping alliances, Copenhagen has chosen a bolder path. It now sees itself as a frontline NATO member, defending not just its own waters but the principles of Western freedom and collective defense. This newfound confidence has earned Denmark respect across Europe and even admiration from its Baltic neighbors. Public opinion in Denmark is overwhelmingly supportive of this firm stance. The Danish people understand the stakes. They've watched Russia's actions in Ukraine and know that deterrence is the only language Moscow understands. Danish politicians from across the spectrum have agreed that national security must take precedence over neutrality. Military budgets have risen, defense modernization is underway, and new NATO exercises are scheduled throughout the region. Denmark has gone from being a quiet observer to a key player in European security. As for NATO, the alliance now enjoys unprecedented strategic depth in Northern Europe. The Baltic region is heavily fortified, and cooperation between member states has reached levels unseen since the Cold War. Joint air patrols, naval drills, and intelligence missions have become routine. Even non-military infrastructure, like energy pipelines and communication cables, is now better protected. NATO has also made clear that any attempt by Russia to challenge this new status quo will be met with overwhelming response. Moscow's options are limited. It can protest diplomatically, threaten retaliation, or increase hybrid warfare tactics like cyber attacks and disinformation. But these are defensive reactions, not strategies of power. The truth is that Russia no longer controls the narrative. Its threats carry less weight, and its ability to intimidate neighboring countries has been broken. Every NATO action in the Baltic further erodes Russian influence. The once dreaded Kremlin has become a cornered actor, struggling to defend what little strategic space it has left. There's also an important symbolic dimension in how Denmark's move represents the smaller nations standing up to great powers. This is a powerful message for countries like Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, nations that have long feared Russian aggression. They now see Denmark's leadership as a signal that even smaller states can shape the outcome of major geopolitical conflicts when they act decisively and align with strong allies. The Baltic region, once seen as vulnerable, is now one of NATO's strongest defensive lines. In Moscow, frustration is growing. Putin's administration continues to boast about military capabilities, but even inside Russia, experts admit that the country has been strategically isolated. The Baltic blockade has reinforced the image of a shrinking empire. The Kremlin has lost its ability to expand westward, and that carries deep psychological consequences. In Russian political culture, access to the sea has always symbolized power and prestige. Losing that in the Baltic is a humiliation that will echo through the corridors of power in Moscow. The long-term implications are enormous. NATO's control over the Baltic means Europe's northern flank is secure. It prevents Russia from threatening Scandinavian countries or using the Baltic for surprise operations. It also strengthens the defense of Poland and the Baltic states. In essence, this is the final step in transforming the Baltic Sea into a NATO-controlled zone of peace and deterrence. It's a geopolitical wall that Russia will find almost impossible to breach. Denmark's role in achieving this outcome will be remembered as historic. What started as a small country's defensive measure has now become a cornerstone of European stability. By blocking Russia's access and reinforcing NATO's maritime control, Denmark has proven that strategic geography, when combined with political courage, can change the course of global affairs. The message is clear. The days of unchecked Russian expansion in Europe are over. As tensions continue, both sides are watching carefully. NATO is maintaining high alert, while Russia tries to find a way to respond without provoking a direct conflict it cannot win. The situation remains fragile, but one thing is certain: the balance of power in the Baltic Sea has permanently shifted. Denmark's actions have ensured that NATO, not Moscow, now dictates the terms of engagement in Northern Europe. This transformation will likely shape European security for decades to come. The Baltic Sea, once a contested arena, is now a shield protecting democratic nations from authoritarian threats. And at the center of this transformation stands Denmark, a country that has shown remarkable determination, courage, and leadership at a time when the world needed it most. So as we look ahead, the story of Denmark blocking Russia's access is more than just a military or political headline. It's a lesson in how alliances, geography, and unity can overcome aggression. It's a reminder that even in the face of threats, freedom can prevail when nations stand together. Russia may try to adapt, but its influence in the Baltic is fading fast, and with every passing day, NATO's control grows stronger. Denmark has redrawn the map of the Baltic, not through war, but through strategy, alliance, and resolve. The ripple effects of this move will be felt far beyond the region, from the corridors of Brussels to the Kremlin itself. And as the tides of the Baltic Sea continue to flow, one truth stands clear. NATO holds the waters, Denmark holds the line, and Russia's path to dominance in Europe has been blocked once and for all.